Section 4.6 is about corresponding parts and something called the correspondence relationship. This is the correspondence relationship. The order of the letters saying two things are congruent, okay? These things here, everything here, these 6 things, these are all the corresponding parts. In other words, angle A corresponds to angle D. So they're corresponding parts of 2 different triangles. And these are the corresponding pairs of sides. And what we know is if 2 triangles are congruent, all of the corresponding parts are congruent. And that becomes a big part of our proofs next week. But what we learned from 4.4 and 4.5 is if we have to prove 2 triangles are congruent, we only need 3 things. We need 3 things in combination with those theorems. We need 3 pairs of corresponding parts. So you don't need all 6. But they have to be in the right combination. So we need 3 pairs of corresponding parts in the right combination to be congruent. Should have put that here. But that's what we worked on in class yesterday. And so today, it's just an extension of that. So you're going to look at this phrase a whole bunch. Anytime 2 triangles are congruent, all the corresponding parts are congruent. So you're going to see this in your book, corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. And you'll see it like this. Corresponding parts of the congruent triangles are congruent. You'll have to state it on a test. I'm going to ask you right off the top of your chapter 4 test, what does this mean? You're going to state it once, word for word. And then you could just use it in all your proofs. So a lot of times you're just going to say it's because of CPCTC. It's just quicker to write, but you have to know what it means. And sometimes when you do proofs, after a while you forget what it means. So every once in a while say it out loud to yourself, what does that mean? And what that means is, it just is related to this picture. So this statement right here means that when 2 triangles are congruent, there's 6 pairs of corresponding parts that are congruent. And sometimes when you're doing a proof, you have to pick the part you want. Okay? So, for you guys tonight, how does it affect you? It's really simple. You're going to do the exact same thing you've done before. You're going to mark your drawing, and you're going to determine if the triangles are congruent, if they ask you to determine that. And then you're going to say why they're congruent, and then you're going to say what answer their question. So when I look at number 6 as an example, it says M is the midpoint of WX and YZ. And they're asking you this. What they're really asking you is, are these corresponding parts are congruent? Are they congruent? And so in order to say yes or no, you have to make a little argument off to the side of your paper. It's like an informal proof. So you're going to take M as the midpoint of WX. And so that would say that you would mark your picture like that. It also tells you M is the midpoint of YZ, so you would mark your picture like that. So, Carson, what else do we know from the picture? Anything?
Like vertical angles are congruent.
Right, so the vertical angles are congruent. Okay, so Ingrid, can I determine the triangles to be congruent? Why?
Because since the vertical angles are congruent because of the rule you just explained.
Right. So
you know that since that if corresponding parts that of congruent triangles are congruent.
Before I get there, what triangles are congruent? So I'm asking you, can you tell if the triangles are congruent and what theorem supports that? So what triangles are congruent? Let's start with that.
X, M, Z, and Y, M, W.
XMZ congruent to YMW, so,
W1.
okay, so not YMW, okay? And then Claire,
Oh yeah, you're right. Sorry.
so XM, right, XMZ, X corresponds to W. W,
Yeah.
M, Y. So Claire, what conjecture supports that? Not that the triangles are congruent. So, yeah, so what I'm envisioning in your homework is this. Since, and then you make this statement, since these two triangles are congruent by side angle side, can we conclude that YW is YW corresponding to ZX or XZ? Are they in the same position?
Yes.
Yes. So since the two triangles are congruent by side angle side, YW is congruent to ZX, and the reason is the corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So the answer to the question is yes, but what your homework's going to look like is yes with all of that. Got it? Now let's do another one. I'll post these examples. So what do you know about this one, Rebecca? Tell me something you know.
ABC is an isosceles triangle, so that means that two of the sides are equal.
Okay, and when they say the vertex angle, they don't tell it, you're going to go with the picture, this being the vertex angle. It's also, so you do know these two sides are equal.
Yes.
Okay, so Aki, what else do you know?
CD is the bisector of vertex angles,
So it's an angle bisector. If it's bisecting an angle, it's an angle bisector. So how would you mark the picture?
the angle on both sides.
Yeah, so you would do like little marks like this, right? Okay, so what else do you know, Jake? That's congruent to itself. So Jackson, what can you conclude?
Side angle, side, very congruent.
What's congruent?
Triangle ACD,
ACD
BCD,
is congruent to triangle BCD by
side angle, side and angle, side.
by side angle side. Okay, so is this true? Is AD congruent to BD? Yeah, so AD is congruent to BD because of the fact that corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. That's what your homework's going to look like. Got it? And there will probably be situations where you say no. Okay? Yeah, Ethan.
If it's a bisect and this is an isosceles triangle, could it already be, like, could you decide that from something congruent without having to do all that?
So, you can't assume anything anymore. You can logically reason that because this is an angle bisector in an isosceles triangle, that D is also a midpoint, and AD is congruent to DB, and also there's all these other things, but that would become a proof. So right now you're trying to just answer the question that they ask and not assume anything, and assume that the person you're writing for knows nothing. They know nothing. It's like a clean slate. Okay. Well, they know the definition of isosceles, but you're not going to jump to any conclusions. If you start jumping to conclusions, you're going to not be doing a proof. So it's like in a court of law. People know a lot of things, but you have to say it out loud and reason it before you get credit for it. Right? Even if somebody's you know, if we think somebody's guilty and everybody knows that they did some sort of crime, you still have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, so you can't assume nothing. Okay, so that's what your homework's like.